So this is going to be a video mainly just discussing, I guess, a prognostication, and it's in response, of course, to the YouTuber I'd consider my favorite political commentator. Even if I disagree with him on some core issues, I think he is, above all, the best person in terms of predictions and in terms of analyzing a lot of cultural themes in current events. And that, of course, is Tarl Warwick, better known as Sticks and Hammer 666, who's currently living in the Netherlands. And he released a video a couple days ago saying that a Biden presidency will not be the end of America. And I think that I largely agree with his sentiment, but one thing that I wanted to go over is something that he didn't really engage in. He is very, very bullish about this idea that Biden will likely lose, and that Trump is in his mind almost assured of winning the presidency. And given that Styx has predicted accurately a lot of different races in the recent past, including Brexit, including the 2016 election, and including some other races, I believe in England and in other parts of the world. Of course, I would feel confident. I don't think that you can grow too confident. You run the risk of being a victim of your own arrogance through being overconfident. And he's in the Netherlands right now, so he's not necessarily seeing things in the field as much as I am. I'm living in Ohio. I live in a very blue part of Ohio, but I will say that from walking around on the street, the fact is I do live in a different neighborhood than I did back in 2016. But I would say that there is a little bit more support for Joe Biden at this stage of the race than I remember for Hillary Clinton, just in terms of yard signs. Now, the fact is, so we would be surprised how few people show up on registered voter lists. So I would say that while in my part of the state of Ohio, it is overwhelmingly supportive of Biden, it could be that we're just not seeing that there is a huge population of people who might not vote. There is another population of people who might secretly be voting for Trump and not stating it. And I would say that there is a population like the latter because there are people who tell me that they want to vote for Donald Trump, but they're afraid to put out a sign. They're afraid to, engage in certain activities that would out them to the public, to the people that surround them as a Trump supporter, for fear of social ostracization, potential professional repercussions, and even physical violence in some cases. Mainly, I would say people who support Trump are not willing to come out and say it because they fear that they could have they could be told at work to shut up and not make public their views. That's something that I have heard personally from a couple people and from people who are seeking jobs who say, well, it's not really a good position to have to come to the table and say, oh, I support this president because it's unpopular according to the corporate logic at the moment. So I would say that there are a number of people out there in this area of the country who are secret Trump supporters. So it could be that we have a lot of downward pressure in the polls from people who are reluctant to show their support. So in that case, Sticks is more than correct to assume that the Trump victory is more likely than the media is giving it the possibility of. And I would add, by the way, I do know somebody whose house was physically attacked because she put out a Trump sign, Trump Pence 2020 sign. And in fact, her lawn was vandalized in a very disgusting way. And I would say that the fact that these types of things are not being covered by the media, I find to be very much an element of why we don't see as much public support for Trump, because if you get your personal views, um, basically, like if the feedback to your personal views is some sort of violence or intimidation or something, which is, this is full on voter intimidation, then yes, people are not going to be as vocal as they might be. People who see this and they see what other people are getting as a response to their views of Donald Trump, they will be less inclined to publicly voice their views. Now, getting to the root of the video, Sticks, X, and Hammer put out a clip talking about the doomsday scenario of many people, a lot of these people who say, oh, if Biden becomes president, the United States will cease to exist as we know it. I would largely agree with what I remember Sticks saying. I think it was 2 days ago, which is that the Biden presidency, if it would happen, would be a startling return to boredom. Okay, and I'm not saying that it would be a good thing. I'm saying that many of the issues that the media made into a public spectacle over the past couple years, the wall, immigrant detention centers, the Russian collusion narrative, all of the stuff that this white supremacy epidemic. A lot of these things might become passe because we will enter what will be in effect a third Obama term. And some people have already said to me, oh, Biden is not even going to govern. He's going to either be forced out, he'll be forced to step aside by the people managing him, his handlers, or he will voluntarily step aside in favor of his running mate, who is yet to be announced. I've been consistent in saying I think it's going to be Kamala Harris. Other people are putting forward Susan Rice or even Val Demings for whatever reason, even though I think she would be a poor choice at this point because she's a former police officer. It would anger a lot of people within the black community and within the far left. So my personal perspective is that this doesn't matter whether it is Biden or whether it is one of his stooges, his vice president. Let's say he comes into office and he's the president and Kamala Harris is like really wielding the power, or his cabinet of people, which would include Lawrence Summers and a lot of these neocons who got us into the wars of the Middle East. It would be back to the days of 2008 when Obama came into office, minus the charisma, because the fact is that while Joe Biden is a very folksy and he's very folksy, has a good connection to some people. A lot of people say he's a warm individual, regardless of all the stuff about kid touching and diddling and basically finger fucking his interns or whatever. Tara Reid, I think she was a senior staff member, so he actually a fully paid staff member supposedly, right? And I think there is credible evidence, but let's set aside that. So all of that stuff about him, Barack Obama had much more credibility, because you remember there was zero allegation of sexual assault against Barack Obama when he came into office, except for that one thing where they said that gay prostitute gave him a Hummer back in like 1999 in Chicago, which the media didn't take that allegation seriously, from a guy who said, oh yeah, Barack Obama and me we were in I think it was like in a Chevrolet or something back in Chicago or something. Yeah, I wonder why. So this is why the media is so poorly in regard, because you have allegations treated differently across several politicians. But yet, with these allegations existing, and with Joe Biden being well past his prime, not exactly the most lucid orator, yeah, you would have basically a person with the same conditions as Barack Obama coming into office, but much fewer of the advantages. And then the vice president would become effectively the caretaker, and the person who drives policy along with the cabinet. So the people he would put into place, like Summers, who would be Treasury Secretary, like potentially some gargoyle like David Frum, who could be appointed Secretary of Defense or Secretary of State, all of the crap that happened under Bush and Obama would be back. So this fear of a leftist revolution, if Joe Biden became president, I don't think it's immediately going to happen. I think it could take a very long time for something like that to happen. Obviously, I think that some of the themes that we're seeing right now are going to continue because the repercussions of defunding the NYPD to the tune of I think it was $1 billion in New York, yeah, that's going to have an effect. So in local areas, the effects of what local politicians are doing are going to get worse and continue. In some areas of the country, you're going to see a retrenchment and hardening of the right wing opposition. You're going to see in especially states, I believe, like Kentucky and Tennessee and Arkansas, states like Missouri that have large urban centers, you're going to see a very sharp division between the rural and urban parts of the state. And not that there isn't one already, but you're going to see Joe Biden basically be the president of a country that the media portrays as united, but in reality is going to be largely a patchwork of different problems. You're going to see the same problems in California that you've been seeing for years and years and years. You're going to see wildfires. You're going to see droughts, unless there's some sort of change in terms of the precipitation patterns. You're going to see a lot of issues with fracking, right? Because a lot of the progressives objected to fracking under Obama. Obama let it happen. I don't see any reason why Joe Biden would not let it happen, right? The Medicare for All issue, I think, will get will get set aside. The Biden presidency will probably do very little in terms of solving the medical insurance issue, the health coverage issue of most Americans. They'll try to shoehorn in more features to Obamacare, which, by the way, they would need two houses of Congress in order to do it. So that brings up a separate issue. What will Congress look like if Joe Biden becomes president? If Joe Biden becomes president and the Democrats control both houses of Congress, and the next justice to retire, let's say it's Ruth Bader Ginsburg or Clarence Thomas or Stephen Breyer, gets the they decide to retire. Yeah, I think we're going to see a significant shift in terms of the Supreme Court. That's why I think that yes, you have a right to be disappointed in a lot of these justices like Gorsuch and Roberts in terms of some of their decisions. But I don't really like the type of people that Joe Biden would put on the Supreme Court. He's already promised to put a woman of color. I think it was a black woman on the Supreme Court. It's like that's not the criteria. You're supposed to choose a justice based on their qualifications, not based on some not narrow it down in terms of their racial background, racial and gender background, right? And so you see this blatant pandering, which I think that if he were to come to power, it's perfectly possible that Joe Biden would go back on it. And what would happen? The media might make a stink for a couple days and then just get over it. The media would suddenly discover that the accountability of the president has receded very, very much, because they would say that Joe Biden is making a pragmatic decision that's for the interest of everyone. They would never do that for the current president, Donald Trump, because with him, it has to be some sort of greed angle in terms of things like the emoluments clause. They would never accuse Joe Biden of violating the emoluments clause based on the dealings of his children, specifically Hunter Biden. Obviously, they're both named Biden. They would never, ever, ever make a stink about Joe Biden, deciding to deploy troops into a war zone in some hellhole in the third world, right? Because they would say that he's using American power in order to improve human rights. So if we were to engage in some war overseas in a country like Sudan, for the sake of argument, the media would probably portray it as his generosity to the people of Africa. That's not the way that they relate to the Trump presidency. If you remember what happened when four special forces soldiers died in an operation against Boko Haram in Cameroon. And I want to emphasize that the themes that I'm bringing up are not political themes. They're not themes that I think that if you're a progressive and you're anti-war, or if you're neutral and you're anti-war, or if you're conservative and you're anti-war, you should judge an operation overseas by the same criteria, regardless of who the president is. And I think that a lot of progressives under Obama were trying to talk about it, and the media simply ignored them. People like Glenn Greenwald, who by no means would be a friend of me, right? Me and Glenn Greenwald probably couldn't sit in the same room together because I'd probably just taunt him nonstop about being a piece of shit. But the fact is that on small issues such as the anti-war plank, where people don't want our troops being deployed overseas, the media would suddenly lose all urgency to remove U.S. troops from war zones, and you've already seen it concerning what happened in Afghanistan when Trump has been trying to remove troops from overseas. The media has been hyping up allegations of bounties against U.S. troops by the Russians towards the Taliban. So that's just with foreign policy. In terms of economics, people think, oh, the Biden would come in. Yes, he would cave to the far left, and we would start the creep towards socialism. That's not exactly what I think would happen. I think Sticks was sort of talking about that. I'm not quite. I don't remember precisely what he said, but people have to put this into perspective. The Democratic Party talks a lot about its leanings towards having the government step in and give people shit for free and help people for free and do things like expand the welfare state and things like that. And in many respects, it does do that. They do use taxpayer money in order to pay for shit that doesn't matter, in order to largely expand the power of the government to the expense of everyone else. And that's why we have a runaway Defense Department. That's why we have a runaway Treasury Department. That's why we have a runaway Department of Homeland Security and a runaway Housing and Urban Development Department. And all the different departments of the government are these massive, massive bureaucracies. But that's not necessarily a result only of socialist ideology. It's also a result of what the Democratic Party's real motivation is, which is greed and the spreading of favors and powers to people that are close to them. So instead of thinking about this in terms of, oh, this is going to be a leftist revolution that's going to tear apart America's social and cultural fabric, which there will be social and cultural prices we're going to pay. I'm not disputing that. Obviously, I don't agree with the Democratic Party's social agenda on abortion and on gay rights and anything else, on firearms especially not. But those things I think are a bit of a side issue. The real thing that they strive for, the real thing that the Democrats crave, is the power of the purse. They will be using, especially if they have the House and the presidency, they will be allocating a lot of monies to friends and confidants of theirs who are working as consultants or working as activists or having these grant-making foundations. Foundations including Black Lives Matter, for example. Foundations like Planned Parenthood. And all of that activity is really what the Democratic Party is about. This goes back to several administrations. I don't know if the Johnson administration did this because, I haven't dug that far deep. But certainly under Jimmy Carter, if you read, I think it's up there, but can't see it. If you read Shakedown by Ken Timmerman, which was published, I think, in the late 90s. Here we go. So this book is basically a compendium of the career of one of the biggest scam artists in the history of the civil rights movement, Jesse Jackson. And Jesse Jackson, under the Carter administration, was already receiving federal grant money for basically stuff that he wasn't really doing, things like urban urban activism. I don't know, like distributing food to the poor. And most of the money ended up going to consultants. So a lot of the issues that we're seeing today with nonprofits, a lot of the issues that many people who, you might be following, like James O'Keefe, or like the person I interviewed a couple weeks ago, not as well known, Tyler O'Neill, are covering the corruption of nonprofits, profit organizations. In the 70s, Jesse Jackson was a great example of it. And one of the ways that you could do this was through federal grant monies. You could go to these departments, and because you knew people in Congress and in these departments, you could basically get no bid contracts. You could do all sorts of things. Yeah, you're going to get more minority set asides. You're going to get more of that type of, um, you know, nepotism and cronyism, because that's what the Democratic Party really is about. So that happened under Carter, that happened under Clinton, and that happened under Obama. That happened under every Democratic administration in the past 50 years. And it's not as if the Trump administration and the Republicans don't have versions of this, but it doesn't work the same way. You're not necessarily seeing nonprofits make that type of money under them. I think under President Bush there was that whole faith-based initiative thing, which was basically the same thing. So I want to make it clear: the Joe Biden presidency, regardless of how active Joe Biden is in that presidency, will be a sluggish version of the Obama and Bush presidencies and all the other corrupt politicians you've had. It doesn't mean that if you are, if you're a Trump critic, I don't think that you necessarily need to vote for him. Obviously, there's this whole talk of Kanye West running, and I do want to see the debates between Kanye West, Joe Biden, and Donald Trump. But I think people do need to get some perspective about what's going to happen. There will be more wars. There will be more corruption. There will be very little change in terms of environment and conservation and all that. So all of you green people, you're gonna basically get dicked like real hard. It's gonna be all this stuff that you're complaining about under Trump. It's gonna be the same thing. It's just gonna be much worse, right? So or it's not gonna be worse. I don't think it'll change. It'll just, you won't hear about it from the press anymore, because it'll be as if it doesn't really matter. In the grand scheme of things, after the 2016 election, when some things that Trump had promised didn't seem apparently to be coming true, obviously some of them took time, like the wall. The thing that people held on to for a very long time was this mantra that at least it's not Hillary. And that was sort of pathetic, because you elect somebody in order to be the implementer of what they promised, not to just not do what their opponent did, right? It's a very small consolation. So when Joe Biden would be elected, if he gets elected, which I personally am not going to vote for this clown, but if he gets elected, the main mantra of a lot of people who are disappointed in what he's doing is going to be, oh well, at least Trump is gone. That's going to be the big thing. Their big accomplishment will be exactly what Joe Biden promised during the campaign, that he's not Trump, that he can beat Trump, that blah blah blah. Trump is afraid of me, yada yada yada. So it won't really matter whether your life improves, or whether you are getting better health care, or whether your water is cleaner. Remember the whole Flint water crisis? I wonder why the Democrats don't talk about water quality anymore. Remember the wildfires in California? I'm sure if there's more wildfires this summer, you're going to suddenly see Democrats say that it's the federal government's fault. Remember all the stuff about the hurricane in Puerto Rico? When a hurricane would happen under Joe Biden, they would basically make it seem like this is, it's God's, it's just the raw violence of nature, right? They wouldn't even mention Joe Biden's role in it. Even if the effort would be completely incompetent, they would never mention it, because it wouldn't be political anymore. They would stop making stuff that isn't political anymore, because the person that in their mind is responsible for it is no longer responsible for it. The presidency will have a much reduced importance in their eyes. Now, the last thing that I want to go over on this theme concerning what the Biden presidency would look like is the other possibility in terms of Congress. Let's say that one or two houses of Congress are going to be in the hands of the GOP, at least during his first term, which I don't think that there's going to be two terms of Biden. But let's suppose that there's, um, he gets into office and the House is in the Republicans' hands, or the Senate is in Republicans' hands and the other House is in the Democrats' hands. So if the Democrats control the Senate, which I think is not necessarily going to be easy to do, but you never know. If they control the Senate under Joe Biden, but they don't control the House, you will have gridlock in terms of budgets. You're going to see a lot of the same crap that we saw under Obama, where Paul Ryan and John Boehner were shutting down the government a lot. So you will see the GOP returning to the same game that they were playing under Obama, where literally every single thing was worth shutting down the government, which will, a lot of people will probably say, well, you were such bitches under Donald Trump that you would continually try to reach across the aisle, even when you did have power, when you did have the capacity to implement Trump's policies. You were such cowed bitches, and you were so anxious to please the media. Yet now that Joe Biden is president, once again you grew a pair of balls. That'll be what will happen if the House is in Republican hands. And if only the Senate is in Republican hands, you'll have a similar issue, because suddenly you'll see Mitch McConnell, or who Mitch McConnell, by the way, is getting very old. But whoever's going to be the Senate majority leader, if the Republicans control the Senate, will suddenly become this figure that's on TV all the time and talking about the need for fiscal responsibility and all. So the main theme I'm talking about is that you're going to see that the American public learn nothing, that they still don't understand that both of these parties are very corrupt in their own way. One of them is very beholden to the defense industry, very beholden to oil and gas interests, beholden to the evangelical right, beholden to, obviously they support Israel a lot. In my opinion, it's not the right type of support. I don't believe that they should be giving them foreign aid. I believe that we support our allies by trying to make them more independent, not by trying to just continually send taxpayer money in order for that country to buy weapons from us. So that's the GOP. The Democrats are very corrupt because they take money as consultants. They have continual conflicts of interest. They hire their friends and family. Just yesterday I saw that there was a primary in New Jersey, and a woman got nominated for the seat in New Jersey where Jeff Van Drew is the congressman. Jeff Van Drew, the Democrat who became a Republican last year over the impeachment. And this woman is married to a Kennedy. So essentially, the Democrats are a party where if you marry into the right family, you're suddenly qualified to run for political office. That's really my impression of the party. You have two parties that are an oligarchy. This is the main theme. If the Biden presidency ever happens, I don't know I don't know where to turn from then on, because the Republicans certainly will not be a credible alternative. They will return to being the utter and complete joke they were from 2008 to 2016 until Donald Trump showed up. I would still support Rand Paul if he was to have a stronger position in the party, but that doesn't look like it's going to happen. So my main point here is that a Biden presidency would reinforce, at least to me, at least to a lot of the people I think that would watch Styx's channel, that you do need to break up the two-party system. You need more than two parties, because the two parties themselves represent only their own greed and their own self-interest. And in many cases, they cooperate with each other in order to promote those goals, in order to promote their own profits and their accumulation of wealth. And I think that is a sentiment that would probably be common across the aisle, whether you're on the far left or you're on the far right, or if you're in the middle. I think most people agree that that's the way the system works. So please like, share, and subscribe. I also want you to follow me. You can see on the screen, behind me, the different platforms, and I especially want you to go to library and click on Bold Like a Leopard and subscribe. And also, if you want to chip in a few bucks, go to Subscribestar. You see my screen name is Chef Leopard. And have a pleasant rest of your Wednesday. It's hump day, baby.